Welcome back to the news, everybody. There is a hell of a lot to talk about today. Developers are industry-wide in pretty damn deep trouble because the layoffs are unrelenting. But today, it's not just the developers who are out, because the ex-EA and until very recently current CEO of Unity, John Riccitiello, is out of his role. Yes, Unity has a new leader, and all of this, of course, seems to be in response to the utter disaster that was them trying to change the terms of the deal on how they were handling pricing. But that's not all. There's good news for Phantom Liberty, and Redfall's Steam player base has surged by a whopping 211%, technically speaking, and you can get technically transformed by today's sponsor. Boot.dev, their founders are actually viewers of this channel, and if you use code Bellular News, you will get 25% off your purchase. Now, Boot.dev is a programming role-playing game that makes learning back-end development fun. Like, they've got quests, levels, achievements, a global leaderboard. It's really, really well put together. Now, back-end devs earn a median salary of 100 grand as of 2022, and it's a role that gives you a lot of flexibility, right? Hybrid work, that kind of thing. So BootDev specializes in learning back-end development with Python and Go at your own pace. And the point is that you avoid tutorial hell and you're just able to sit down and start coding. That's exactly what their platform is geared towards. And if you just go through the various topics, it is an utter boatload of content, starting off super approachable and then going properly in depth. And they're adding new lessons all the time. Basically, a one-stop shop learning journey that has you avoiding randomly bouncing around YouTube tutorial hell and instead has you focused on an end-to-end learning path that will have you shipping projects, writing code, and feeling confident. I wish they were there in 2012 when I was starting out in computer science. Now, these are skills that lead to a significant earning potential and also are just really damn interesting. So you can and should get started today, where the code Bellular News will get you 25% off your purchase. And a big thanks to Lane and Alan for supporting our team. All right, let's roll. Okay, let's get into things. John Riccitiello, after 9 years as CEO, is out. He is retiring as president, chief executive officer, chairman, and a member of the company's board effective immediately. This is obviously after the disastrous rollout of the proposed runtime fee, a move that I think had a lot of game developers feeling rather like, gamers did during Riccitiello's time at Electronic Arts, where, we did obviously see some rather rumbly business practices. Of course, Riccitiello is the guy who talked about being 5 hours deep in Battlefield and them charging you money for a reload. And while I don't think anybody seriously thought he was going to charge people, to reload their gun in Battlefield, the point was very much that, oh yeah, you're in too deep and now you're just being nickel and dimed. That's the way that those things made gamers feel, and well, exactly the runtime fee thing, it was going to make developers feel that way too. Of course, he is the man who previously had led FIFA into the loot box era. The whole Project 10 bucks thing, if you remember that, where a game purchased brand new, you would be able to play that online. However, that's only because you used a code that came in the game. And if you bought a game secondhand, the code would already be used. So you then have to basically buy, for 10 bucks, I suppose, a multiplayer license. And this is when the industry was trying to fight back on the pre-owned market, because with the pre-owned market, there's only one person who's making any money, the game retailer, right? GameSpot, Game in the UK, they make money selling a pre-owned game. But as far as the developer or the publisher is concerned, they've had absolutely nothing to do with that, and they don't get any money. So, of course, this was that being done, but in a way that very directly made the consumer feel nickel and dimed, which is why people absolutely did not like it. So, those repeated cries for his exit have ended up, I suppose, working. We don't exactly know why he's gone, but he's thoroughly gone. He is retiring in all of those different capacities. But that being said, he will remain in an advisory role just until they find a new permanent CEO. And speaking of CEOs, they do have an interim one. It's this guy, James M. Whitehurst. And in terms of his experience, right, he was a COO at Delta Airlines. Also, he was at Red Hat, which is an open source software developer, then at IBM as an advisor and president. But he has some additional roles, and these additional roles are, they're rather interesting. Yes, this is where it gets juicy, and where some of you may be now thinking, better the devil that we know. Because in particular, one of these that's relevant to Unity is his role at Silver Lake Group LLC. a global investment firm, as a special advisor. Yes, I'm sure he does a lot of special advising. Now, they are currently one of the largest shareholders of Unity, right? They directly helped to finance the $1 billion in convertible notes from Unity for their purchase of the advertising and monetization company ironSource in 2022. Now, when that ironSource deal went down, man, a lot of devs were really worried, didn't like the direction, but that's mostly a conversation that happened between developers. It didn't really spill out to the broader audience. I mean, now though, it rather obviously has. So you could say that this is some material evidence as to where Unity will go. Like, he's a special advisor to the people who funded that ironSource deal. And ultimately, that's it. Like, Riccatello was, in a way, sort of legacy from before that ironSource deal. But if this is kind of like an example of the direction that Silver Lake wants Unity to go in, then you may actually just be left thinking, right, devil we knows better, which is a pretty crazy situation. So it's the end of this saga of the story, but it absolutely is not the end of the story. And certainly other engines like Godot are going to be looking pretty damn enticing, at least for those developers who are, well, frankly, not too deep. Because right now, like, we're making a game in Unity and we're sort of in too deep. We cannot afford the transition right now. But if I could just wave a wand and be on Godot, that's where I'd be. And when it comes to long-range planning, I certainly have some questions to answer. Our next story then is really sad, actually. TellTale Games have laid off a significant number of their staff, and this happened in early September, with basically nobody really knowing. Now, what happened here is that TellTale kind of went totally closed, right? The whole thing went tits up in 2018. Then the company reformed in 2019 with most of the same licenses. And of course, that has a lot of people really wanting, say, The Wolf Among Us 2. Now, this move of the layoffs would have actually happened before the full release of all episodes of the most recent TellTale game, which was developed by Deck 9, called, The Expanse, a TellTale series. Of course, The Expanse, love the books, love the show, big fan of the game. So it's really sad that ultimately it doesn't seem to have went that well. Like, it got perfectly reasonable reviews, but in terms of sales, I think this is evidence that the numbers were not looking good. Now, there are some things to note here. Some of them are just really sad. Like, as an example, the new version of TellTale rehired, or at least brought on as consultants, people who worked at the old TellTale. And that kind of leads to a sad example of, say, an employee who was at the company, then rejoined the company to work on The Wolf Among Us 2, who has now been laid off from the same company twice, which is quite rough. Now, the Expanse game was actually worked on by two studios, Deck 9 and TellTale. But it's not just TellTale who have had layoffs. Deck 9 also had layoffs, seemingly one of those things where primary production had ended and then they trimmed down again. Now, TellTale don't seem to be going anywhere soon. This is what they've said to GameIndustry.biz. We do not take this action lightly, and our commitment to storytelling and finding new ways to do so remains the same. And they say they're, grateful to everybody in the journey and so on and so forth. What's interesting, though, is they've clarified that all of their in-production projects are still in production. Now, in terms of IP, there are some question marks amongst The Wolf Among Us. The developer who left essentially said that on The Wolf Among Us, they're not really able to say stuff because of NDA, so who exactly knows there? The thing is, though, it appears that this is not because of a distinct, big-time lack of money, because they are still having other things go on. As an example, there's a company in the UK that does, basically, it's like touch-based video tech, and they acquired them in September. Right, so they acquired this company last month, but also in September they had layoffs, which ultimately makes me think that this is the cold calculus, and that's just the way that the numbers have came out. I don't know if this means that they are just not projecting as good long-term revenue from the Expanse. It could be like the Expanse falling below average. That doesn't completely kill them. Maybe they are generally relying on outsourcing for some of their future games. But whatever's happened, they clearly don't have enough money that they feel comfortable sustaining that higher burn rate. So yeah, ultimately, man, it's kind of rough. And this is in the context of, I mean, I feel like almost every time I sit down to do some video work, there's been another round of layoffs somewhere to talk about, which, yeah, it's a big industry, but just about everybody is finding that there is a contraction, that things are getting tight, and finding jobs is tricky. In a recent Roundup episode, actually, we talked about the humongous drop in VC-based funding for the games industry. And you can just see, you know, the quarters roll on, and then it goes from like 2 point something billion to like 700 million or something like that. Absolutely plummets. Rough. And with all this grimness going on, we've got to talk about unions that are going on in Europe, because over in Sweden, 100 developers at Avalanche Studios Group, who are the Just Cause people, not the Hogwarts Legacy people, they have joined up with one of the Swedish trade unions. So that's fairly interesting. It actually represents 1/5 of developers at the company. They're already essentially working on negotiating better conditions. Now, this will be, for a lot of our American viewers, a very different, cultural and regulatory framework, right? And also perhaps even different to some of other parts of Western Europe. Sweden's union infrastructure allegedly has, right, 70% involvement from the workforce across the country. So I suppose if you're watching this in the States, like, this is going to be a radically different thing. Indeed, if you're watching this in the UK, probably very different thing. Quite interesting. But as a result of this, then, no surprise that between Avalanche and the union, it's actually a rather positive mood. There's not some sort of big fight thing like you would see in the sort of, union-busting statements that you might get across, like, say, American companies. Of course, we've talked about that with, say, allegations of reprisals and stuff at Raven Software, right? So a very different situation, and this is one that does follow up a little bit of a past drama, actually, because they essentially had a bunch of collective action going on at the company from staff in November of last year. And basically what happened is a lot of criticism over the company hiring an individual for a high-level position in spite of public accusations of inappropriate behavior. Ultimately, the company did issue a public apology to its staff on that, so I suppose you can sort of see the trend line of progress going in a good direction there. We also see similar going on with CD Projekt Red. Basically, after a round of layoffs in July, staff don't necessarily want to take that sort of thing anymore, so they have formed the Polish Game Dev Workers Union in response to layoffs at the company, and they're going to be building up their management structure in the coming weeks. Of course, those layoffs felt pretty rough. I mean, you had Phantom Liberty coming out, and seemingly they had a bunch of money lined up to go and make the next Witcher game, the next Cyberpunk game, all that stuff. And of course, now Phantom Liberties came out to absolutely incredible reviews. What they say in their statement to IGN: while employees are the ones creating value in this arrangement, they lack any decision power in company structure related matters. That is why we need to organize to enter those situations on equal footing. As for CD Projekt Red, they basically were like, yes, we confirm receipt of message. We will act within compliance, of our legal obligations, right? They then do go on to talk about their own forms of internal employee representation. It's called Red Team Representatives, who are people in the company who are democratically elected and are independent of the management board. And CD Projekt Red claim that they've worked with that over the last while. They hope to continue to be able to do so. But that being said, if you're to think about vibes, you're to think about things from perhaps the employee's position, there is this statement from Marcin Nowinski, right? And this is definitely back a few years, but he said, that's what we do. It's true, we work a lot of overtime, and when people join the company, we warn them that it's really not easy. Releasing a game is every time as hard as if we were sending people to Mars. Now remember, this is him speaking quite a bit prior to the launch of Cyberpunk 2077. So certainly he may say to people bringing this up that he has learned lessons, and that this mindset, well, is obviously one of the things that led to Cyberpunk launching in the way that it did. He says though, but if there are unions, what do we do? Are we not taking off anymore? Unions were originally created to protect low-paid workers, right? These guys are not low-paid workers, they are extremely skilled professionals, and I suppose the extremely skilled professionals would then say that means that we shouldn't be treated in a disposable fashion. I suppose the big question is, what would Marston say now in 2023 after 5 years have passed, and perhaps he's had the opportunity to self-reflect given how things did not go well for them after 2018. Next though, we've got more CD Projekt Red news. This is really fascinating because apparently right? The post-launch support of Cyberpunk 2077 cost $120 million. That is the budget of like multiple large video games. That's kind of crazy. Apparently what this is 40, to use US numbers, 40 mil in the base game for next gen update prep, $62.3 million to make Phantom Liberty, $22 million for the marketing of Phantom Liberty. Now, the launch of Cyberpunk 2077, they had spent $174 million on the base version of Cyberpunk and $142 million on marketing the game. So, you know, add those two numbers together, then add 120 million to that, and then think, I suppose, about purchasing power parity. You know, imagine if you're spending that amount of money on Californian offices and Californian developers versus offices in Poland, right? You know, where you're different economy, different currency, all that jazz. You do just wonder how much it would cost for a large studio in California to make a game the size of Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty. Honestly, it's eye-watering stuff. As for Phantom Liberty, I think they'll be pretty happy with it though, because not only, I imagine, is it leading to humongous sales of the base game and a lot of people jumping back in, it itself has already sold 3 million copies in its first week. That is actually not even counting bundled copies or just new sales of Cyberpunk 2077. So it's well on its way to recouping those costs, and I think now people are overall looking at this as an incredible overall video game package. If you take a look at, say, the long tail of sales for Witcher 3, I mean, that game just sold forever. I wholly expect the same thing to happen for Cyberpunk 2077, so they can probably be happy. Now then, I did tease you at the start of this video of the 211% surge in players. Now, what I didn't tell you, and why I was having a little bit of fun with it, is that that's from a low point average one day a few days ago of 18 concurrent players in Steam to like 58 or 60 players, something like that. But what has happened is 60 FPS mode, and that's meant that everybody has checked up Steam charts for the game and said, oh my god, there's like 50 people playing Redfall on PC. That's crazy. Now, it's not just for PC. This has been paired with a performance mode for the Xbox Series X and S, as well as a whole bunch of other requested features after 6 months of development by the team at Arcane. This includes fully functional silenced weapons, new input options to cater to faster or slower FPS gameplay, stealth takedowns. Didn't know that those weren't a thing, so that's interesting. New world encounters, improved enemy variety, improved AI, better visibility, better icons for players in multiplayer. It's a bunch of stuff, and it took 6 months of how many people? And this is the Steam numbers, an all-time peak of 1,560 and a 24-hour peak of 56, which is pretty damn rough. And even accounting for the obvious fact that this is a game that is on Game Pass and consoles, so this Steam stuff will just be a tiny fraction of the whole. I think, honestly, the lasting impression here is Redfall. I don't know, Redfall, more like Deadfall, haha. Sorry, yeah, that even hurt me. Point is, though, don't release games you had no business making, because from what we understand from this game, right, the top brass at ZeniMax wanted more of these live multiplayer games. That's why Fallout 76 was greenlit. And in that same push that led to Fallout 76, which damaged the Fallout brand significantly with its launch, of course, Wolfenstein Youngblood, which significantly damaged Wolfenstein and the reputation of machine games when it launched. I still remember that skill up review. That was a rough one. This also happened where they made Arcane Austin, who had previously worked in the likes of Mooncrash for Prey, which is absolutely awesome, forced them to make a game that's not the sort of game that really they had experience making or any business making or even that they wanted to make, while they were losing staff because they were making a game that they didn't want to make, but also the people who applied for jobs at Arcane applied thinking they would be making first-person immersive sim games, like, like Prey, like Dishonored. So this is just a massive example of honestly the opposite of Baldur's Gate 3. Because one of the strengths of Baldur's Gate 3 is they made Divinity Original Sin 1, Divinity Original Sin 2, and then made Baldur's Gate, making similar games, same technology. What are business people on? I don't understand. Some of these things are so self-defeating, it makes so little sense. But anyway, that is it for this story. That is it for the video. John Riccitiello is gone. Redfall is still dead. Cyberpunk's doing fantastic, and CD Projekt Red is going to have to thread the needle when it comes to unionization. All interesting stuff. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Let me know. I suppose, have you been playing Phantom Liberty? I think that's going to be my big, Christmas downtime game, personally. Anyway, have a great day. I'll see you next time.